The rise and fall of Britain's finances, and America's warning sign. One. The shock of 1949. On September 19, 1949, Britain's Chancellor of the Exchequer walked into Parliament and announced a 30% overnight devaluation of the pound sterling. The empire's money, once the dominant currency of global trade, collapsed in value. This was not a policy adjustment. It was a confession of bankruptcy. Britain had ruled India, fought Napoleon, and survived 2 world wars. But it could not survive its debt. So what does that actually mean? Empires don't die from military defeat alone. They die when they can no longer pay their bills. Footnote. The 1949 pound devaluation marked the moment Britain publicly admitted it could not sustain its empire financially. 2. How debt took over. Before World War I, Britain was the world's largest creditor, lending to others while maintaining a disciplined debt ratio near 30% of GDP. By 1919, national debt had exploded from £650 million to £7.7 billion. Britain flipped from creditor to debtor almost overnight, owing mainly to the United States. By 1934, it defaulted on its World War I debt. One minister quipped, "Not a dog has barked, but the long-term damage was severe." When World War II arrived, Britain's finances collapsed entirely. Debt reached over 200% of GDP. Colonies that once fed the empire now became its creditors through sterling balances. The irony? Britain owed billions to India, Egypt, and others it had once controlled. Footnote. Britain's shift from global creditor to indebted borrower undermined its ability to finance empire and war. 3. Begging for help. In 1946, Britain secured a $3.75 billion loan from the United States and another $1.9 billion from Canada. The fine print was devastating. The pound had to be convertible into dollars. As soon as that rule took effect, creditors rushed to swap pounds for dollars. Reserves vanished almost overnight. By 1949, Britain had no choice but to devalue. In truth, the empire's collapse had already begun. India gained independence in 1947, Palestine in 1948, and Britain could no longer afford outposts in Greece or Turkey. Footnote. Post-war loans tied to dollar convertibility triggered a run on sterling that forced devaluation and retreat from empire. 4. The final humiliations. The Suez Crisis of 1956 proved the point. Britain and France won the battlefield but lost the war. America threatened financial destruction by dumping sterling bonds unless Britain withdrew. Britain caved within days. 20 years later, another sterling crisis forced Britain to seek IMF rescue loans, with conditions that dictated domestic policy. The last insult? Britain kept paying off World War II debts until December 29, 2006, 60 years after the war ended. Victors don't usually pay for generations. But Britain did. Footnote. Military victories meant little when financial dependence left Britain powerless against US and IMF pressure. 5. The American parallel. Now comes the uncomfortable part. The United States is walking the same path? Debt stands at $33 trillion, 130% of GDP, with interest costs now larger than the defense budget. Military commitments span 865 bases worldwide. The dollar's share of global reserves is slipping, and foreign creditors like China hold trillions in U.S. debt. Historian Neil Ferguson warns that when a great power spends more on interest than on defense, decline follows. That threshold has already been crossed. Footnote. America's soaring debt and military overstretch mirror Britain's decline, raising questions about dollar supremacy. 6. What this means for citizens. If the dollar loses reserve status, the consequences will be personal. Savings can lose value overnight. Investments denominated in dollars could plunge. Living standards may fall as imports become unaffordable. Just as Britain lost independence to American creditors, America could find itself constrained by foreign powers. The signs are visible: high debt, declining reserve dominance, and political gridlock preventing reform. Reform or collapse is the choice. History suggests delay ends badly. Footnote. For ordinary citizens, a dollar crisis could mean devaluation, lost savings, and declining living standards. 7. The lesson of history. Empires don't fall only on battlefields. They fall in banks and balance sheets. Britain thought its empire permanent. It thought sterling was invincible. It was wrong. The same economic laws apply to the United States today. Borrow too much. Spend beyond means. Depend on creditors. Eventually, the bills come due. Britain went from global hegemon to dependent power in less than one generation. America has already been running deficits for over 20 years. The clock is ticking. Footnote. The British collapse shows that financial exhaustion, not armies, ultimately decides the fate of empires.